Imagine a very ordinary morning. You take $100 to the market. Yesterday, that amount of money was enough to buy 1 kilogram of meat, a few bunches of vegetables, and some potatoes. But today, with the same amount of money, the seller shakes their head and says, prices have gone up. You now need to spend more money to buy the same goods you bought yesterday. You did not become poorer overnight. You are still working, still receiving your salary, still carrying money in your pocket. Yet, in a very quiet way, your money has lost value. And that is inflation. First, it is crucial to understand one very important thing. Inflation is not about prices going up, but about money losing value. Rising prices are only the visible surface. What is really happening underneath is that the currency is becoming weaker. When people say high inflation, it means that every unit of money you hold can buy less value than before. Not because goods have suddenly become rarer, but because the measuring tool used to price everything, money itself, has shrunk. Under normal conditions, money represents the value of labor and production in society. Every unit of currency exists because there were goods, services, and human effort behind it. But when money is created faster than real value, when money appears without corresponding goods, each unit of money has to share its value with many others. The inevitable result is that every unit becomes less valuable. This is the deep core of inflation. The danger of inflation lies in the fact that it does not reveal itself immediately. It works slowly and silently. You do not become poor today. This month, your life still feels manageable. But a few years later, you look back and ask yourself, why am I working just as much, maybe even harder, yet life feels more cramped? The answer is often not that you have become worse, but that the money you earn is no longer as strong as it used to be. There are many causes of inflation, but they all revolve around one central axis: the imbalance between money and real value. When governments print money to finance spending, to rescue the economy, to pay debts, or to postpone painful reforms, money grows faster than goods. When production costs rise, fuel, energy, raw materials, businesses are forced to raise prices. When wars, pandemics, or sanctions disrupt supply chains, goods become scarce and prices surge. And when people begin to believe that prices will keep rising, that belief itself helps push prices higher. Inflation is not only an economic phenomenon, but also a collective psychological one. At moderate levels, inflation is considered acceptable. It encourages consumption and investment and prevents money from being frozen. But when inflation goes beyond control, it turns into hyperinflation. At that point, money no longer functions as a medium of exchange, but becomes a burden. History has witnessed such tragedies. Germany after World War I is one such example. The country was exhausted, defeated, forced to pay massive war reparations, with an empty treasury and a deeply unstable society. The German government chose what seemed like the easiest path: printing money to pay debts, fund spending, and keep the system running. At first, no one panicked. Money was still used, markets were open, bread was still available. But gradually, prices began to slip out of control. A loaf of bread that cost a few dozen marks in the morning doubled by the afternoon and multiplied tenfold the next day. By 1923, inflation in Germany was no longer measured in percentages, but in hours. Prices rose so fast that people no longer counted money by bills, but by stacks. In the morning, a loaf of bread cost 200,000 marks. In the afternoon, it could cost 2 million. Workers were paid twice a day, because if payment was delayed, their wages became worthless. Some families had to carry wheelbarrows full of money to the market just to buy basic necessities. There were stories that sounded absurd, but were entirely real. People used banknotes to light stoves because they were cheaper than firewood. Children stacked money into blocks to use as toys. A wheelbarrow full of cash was only enough to buy one loaf of bread. Decades later, on another continent, Zimbabwe repeated this tragedy in an even more extreme form. In the late 2000s, Zimbabwe's economy collapsed due to poor governance, the breakdown of agricultural production, and a sharp decline in exports. Instead of painful reforms, the government continued to print money to cover deficits. This time, the speed of money printing exceeded all historical limits. Inflation in Zimbabwe rose so fast that no one could keep up. The government continuously issued larger denominations: 10,000 Zimbabwe dollars, 1 million, 100 million, 1 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion. Eventually, they issued a 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars note. 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. And what could that buy? Only one loaf of bread.
People no longer counted money. They weighed it.
Going to the market required carrying sacks. Prices changed by the hour. A lifetime of savings turned into waste paper. In the end, people abandoned the national currency altogether. They used US dollars, South African rand, anything that could still hold value. The currency of a nation, a symbol of sovereignty, effectively died. Another modern example is Venezuela, proving that hyperinflation is not just a story of the past, but a present reality. Venezuela is a country rich in oil, once enjoying one of the highest living standards in South America. But extreme dependence on oil, combined with poor management and rigid control policies, made the economy fragile. When oil prices collapsed, national revenue disappeared. Once again, the government chose the familiar solution, printing money to cover losses and controlling prices through administrative orders. Inflation began to rise. Then it went out of control. Then it turned into hyperinflation. Venezuelans had to stand in line for hours to buy food. A monthly salary could not buy a few kilograms of rice. Money lost value so fast that people spent it immediately upon receiving it, because saving meant losing. Some families sold their belongings, their homes, and even searched through trash for food, while their country sat on vast oil reserves. A painful paradox. To deal with the situation, the Venezuelan government repeatedly removed zeros from the currency to simplify transactions. But this only changed appearances, not the substance. People began using US dollars in daily life, while the national currency existed mostly in name. Millions of citizens left the country, not because they did not love their homeland, but because they could not survive in a society where money no longer had value. 3 countries, 3 different contexts, but one common point. When inflation spirals out of control, it does not only destroy the economy, but also the social structure. Wage earners, salaried workers, and savers suffer the most. Their incomes cannot keep up with rising prices. Meanwhile, those who own tangible assets, those in debt, or speculators may sometimes benefit. Inflation is therefore a form of invisible tax, hitting the poor and vulnerable the hardest. Even more dangerous is the psychological impact of inflation. When money loses value, people lose trust. They no longer want to save or invest for the long term, but instead rush to spend, speculate, or hoard. Society becomes unstable, tense, and easily provoked. And once trust in a currency collapses, no economic policy can work effectively in the short term. Inflation, therefore, is not just a story of numbers or economic charts. It lives in bowls of rice, in electricity bills, in the price of fuel every morning. It is the story of Germany a century ago, of Zimbabwe and Venezuela more recently, and a constant concern for every nation in the world. It may unfold slowly and silently, or explode violently, but in any form, it leaves deep scars on human society. Thank you for taking the time to watch until the end of this video. If you found this content useful, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you again in the next videos, where we will continue to understand more clearly the stories behind the world we are living in.